It'll give you a notification.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go.
All right.
You know, for some reason, I don't have my camera blocked, but it's showing just like an opaque screen. So
Is your to me it looks like your camera's turned around. Like it's split view, like it's looking out rather than back.
okay, and where's the icon that I could reverse that?
Depends on the thing. Let's see, hold on. If only Mr. Shohan were here.
Go to your
Is that
camera.
it?
Camera.
Yes.
Yeah. So if on mine, do you have an iPad or a computer?
It's a laptop.
Okay,
This
because
is
mine,
Vivo.
if you hit the screen, it pulls up a camera. It looks like it's got two arrows kind of circling each other.
Mm-hmm.
So
I don't
see,
see.
I would-
No problem. I'll just keep it blocked.
you'll just be
until-
mysterious.
Yes, yes.
There should be a little tab up there that slides.
I see Mr. Shohan.
Hi. Yes,
Perfect.
a little slider here above the camera.
It's blocked.
Okay,
Okay, no problem. I'll keep it as is.
okay. Well, it's 3 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and call this first meeting of 2023 of the Beaufort County School District Technology Committee. And we will start off with the Pledge of Allegiance. And y'all better join in with me.
I
I
pledge
pledge allegiance to the flag
of
of the United States of America
America,
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
one nation,
under God,
God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And Robin, will you let me know when Mr. Smith checks in either in person or online?
Will do.
Okay. So Mr. Dallas, we need to approve the agenda.
Motion is made, Madam Chair, to approve the agenda as stated.
Okay, I'll second it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Agenda is approved. Let's see, Ms. Cushenberry, do we have public comments?
Yes, ma'am, we do.
Okay.
Moment, and I will contact Mr. Cook. Hello, David. I'm calling you for public comments. You'll have 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it, Robin. Sorry about the background noise. I'm in a traffic jam. Thank you, committee members. I appreciate you giving me a chance to speak. I had just a reminder, I had emailed Ms. Boatwright something on February 3rd, and I have not heard back questions in the email. Trying to get some clarification. If she could please take a look at that, I would appreciate it. Since then I have emailed her 3 times looking for responses. I know everyone's very busy. I know there's a lot going on, but the discussion's relevant. The item I wanted to bring up, in order to help my child avoid having to bring a cell phone to school, I was hoping that there was a way to explain to me how parents are prohibited from having email access to students. I was told that I should get my son or my daughter a device and have them bring it to school if I want to be in contact with them during the day for whatever reason, or a change in practice schedule or anything that comes up. Obviously, only needed out of necessary, only as needed. But in an effort to avoid that interference and disruption, I kind of thought that, and I noticed there's nowhere in the policy does it stipulate that parents are not allowed to email students. Mr. Chauhan has responded to my email to show me where the policy says that parents are allowed to email their students. They are our children, and as such, we have a right to communicate with them when necessary. When in school, you can meter the emails, perhaps at registration time. You can indicate that one email address is allowed to communicate with the children that you register. But we need to do something, and this will also help hopefully alleviate any process of disruption in the classroom with kids with cell phones. So I'd really love to have you discuss this. I'm not looking to interfere with my kids' education, but the device that my daughter does have does not function in school. And consequently, if there's a situation where she needs to be picked up from school because practice has changed to a later time, she's unable to do so early enough. And I kind of thought that maybe having access to an email might help a little bit. So if you could have that discussion, I know you have an agenda already, but maybe under new business, you could talk about that or look into it. I'm not asking for any favors. I just think it might be a common sense way to help eliminate disruptions in classrooms with phones. Thanks for your hard work. I appreciate you all, and have a nice day.
You too, thank you. That's it.
Okay, thank you. So let's see, we need to approve the committee meeting minutes from October 17th, which was our last committee meeting. Mr. Dallas, I don't know if you weren't there. I don't know if you feel comfortable.
I do.
Make-
I do.
Okay, perfect.
Motion is made to approve the committee meeting minutes of October the 17th, 2022.
Okay, seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, all right, perfect. Let's see. Oh, and then we also need December 12th. Are we doing them one at a time? I didn't hear. Let's just do another one for December 12th, approved as stated.
Okay, Madam Chair, a motion is made to approve the minutes of December the 12th, 2022.
Okay, seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay, sorry about that. I didn't see that we had two sets when I looked at the agenda. All right, so Mr. Chauhan, I sent you an email because this is a little bit unfair to you since we didn't have a chance to speak before. But as Colonel Guy remembers, and for anybody else who happens to be watching this, last year, what we really focused on was the technology assessment that was done district-wide. And we had some discussions about that. And we also revised the OE, which has now been accepted and formalized. So we have a different OE. And so basically last year was kind of getting everything organized to sort of launch into having a productive and technology committee with the school board. So there wasn't really a great, so we're not kind of in the middle of this process, we're sort of at the beginning. So there weren't real easy items to add on the agenda. So what I thought we would do is kind of, these are the things that I had kind of thought, and we had sort of talked about at the end of our last tech committee, being sort of areas of focus, both within the committee itself and also things that came out from the technology assessment. And I had a great conversation with committee member Carlton Dallas, who really has some good ideas in terms of how we can kind of get started, because technology is such a nebulous thing to define sometimes. It's somewhat in education, somewhat in academics, somewhat in operations. So what we're going to do, I was hoping, is just as we look at these agenda items, just talk about what the district is currently doing, maybe what the goals, or to borrow Mr. Dallas's term, what success looks like in these areas, and then start talking about metrics and things that we can do throughout the year to kind of review that. So that's kind of a wide ball to throw at you.
Okay.
So so if we start with, to me, one of the most pressing issues is what are we doing in terms of technology for the referendum? And I think that goes into two parts. One, technology expenses, where we saw a lot of cost overruns. So looking at how we prevent that this year. And then number two, we're 4 years out from the last referendum. And what are we doing? There's a lot that's changed in those 4 years, particularly with technology in the schools. So what kind of process plans and goals do we have for the projects coming forward for the potential referendum?
One of the processes we have in place right now is my team meets weekly with each of the project managers from operations on the HERE side to get weekly updates of where we're at with different projects. One of the good things that's come out of this meeting is meetings, since we have them weekly, is that we are starting to align some of the issues that we're seeing consistently come up and finding actions to solve those. And we're making a list on HERE side, our operations side, of all these individual smaller issues we've had. And we'll be using those as an outline as we start doing the new referendum. Unfortunately, during the planning for the first referendum, it was done fairly quickly, and when we did those calculations, we had no idea of the effects of COVID and material shortages. So we've got a good idea on that now. Most of the depletion of assets has leveled out now. So we have pretty much standard timelines now. It was up to about 8 or 9 weeks during the worst of it for us to receive computer hardware. For most of our big items, switches, wireless devices, that number has dropped to about 6 months out now for our network switching equipment and about 6 months out for new devices. So that just gives us a better understanding of how to portion out the different projects. And that's what caused some of the grief during the initial referendum, is that, you know, we had made plans, we'd understood 3 to 4 month timelines at the time, and basically those 3 to 4 month timelines went to 8 months to over a year for some of the items, especially when we start talking about our backup generators. Generators were hard hit during the pandemic, and they are, I want to say, almost a year and 3 months out for generators. So it is definitely shifted the timelines, but all that knowledge is very helpful, and it allows us to plan and coordinate the different subs that we won't have the delays we saw the first time around.
Okay. Does Colonel Guyer or Carlton, Mr. Dallas, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Victor Nay is on as well.
Oh, good. Okay, great. Thank you.
Mr. Chowan, thank you, sir, for that update. I guess looking at it strategically, is there a way to leverage technology that links into the ledgers used in the operational arena so that data automatically flows into a report generated from the technology group that can track things such as original expected close date and then what is the actual date, without there requiring a significant amount of meeting time on the part of your very effective staff, but also quite loaded staff. Is there any discussion or plans around that, sir?
Right now, there is not. We usually run off of the finance system, Munis. All the different account ledgers are run through Munis that we work off daily. Now, what operations does do is provide us those milestones during our weekly meetings. But we have not gone further than that to look at an all-encompassing tracking system.
There may be an opportunity to do that. That will save a lot of time on the operational group as well as your group. So and I'm new at this, and I'm not a technology person. God, and everybody knows that. But just from a management perspective, that may be a way to economize the human effort and still produce numbers and data very quickly, sir.
You can definitely research that.
Thank you, Ms. Chowan.
Oh, Colonel Guyer?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, that really hits me well as what Carlton just had to say. How about using being integrated into the PERT chart, the actual schedule of maintenance and renovation and new building, that needs to be somewhat seamless as well, to be able to make sure that you are in your people or your area is infused at the right time with the right amount of materials, so we don't have to go back and undo work to run conduit, for example. So something into the management software for scheduling, surely we can interface into that.
Mr. Nay, I didn't see you. Do you have any questions for Mr. Shohan?
No, I don't have any questions now at this point.
So I'd like to follow up on Carlton Dallas and Colonel Guyer. I think one of the things to me that's going to be a theme of the tech committee is, integration. I mean, Munis to me doesn't seem like the strongest candidate for getting, we've got Facility Dude, which I hate that name. We have some other programs. And so as I'm thinking about this, what I hear from other board members is what we need as a goal for one of the goals with this referendum planning is we need a more seamless, more effective integration with operations, technology and operations to prevent or reduce scheduling delays. And so then what I would say, this is what I'm gonna do throughout this meeting, that's an agenda item for us to track. And then what are the metrics we're going to use to going forward to say, okay, have we achieved this integration, and to continue to have conversations? Because I think in addition, and my other follow-up question would be, in addition to the delays in scheduling, I was under the impression that we did the best we could with the technology planning in terms of budget. But we were, and technology stuff is not only is it hard to budget for effectively, but it can get out of hand in a hurry, and COVID didn't help. But what steps are we taking or can we take to try and get a more accurate budget for the technology, especially when we think about, we've done a lot of technology upgrades, but as we think about schools that we're either going to build or do significant renovation on, do we have a plan for that?
Yes, we do. One of the wonderful things we have learned over these last over 3 years is some of the constraints we've had with subcontractors, especially on our wiring side, and the delays we've seen with it. And to compound on that and to get closer to what Mr. Guyer was talking about, one of the things that's been acknowledged from operations and technology is the fact that when that project gets the first handover, before it was our contracting agents out there with the sub doing the handover. Well, what we found is that wasn't in the best of BCSD's interest for us to do it that way. And operations is now scheduling technology to be in on those handover days. So we actually walk through with the PMs because it's usually easier for us to see some of the oddities very quickly, since we're around that equipment and that stuff every day, more than say one of your head contractors who they come on site and they're running multiple trades and they might miss some of the nuances. So that's one of the shortcomings that we've already identified and are working on processes to alleviate.
Mr. Chohan or Madam Chair, may I ask a question, please?
Jump in.
Mr. Chohan, that sounds somewhat labor intensive. And again, I'm not a techie, so please, I may be asking a question out in outer space, but is there a way that operations group inputs the data into your system or the technology system, the BCSD system, one input, and then that data is dispersed to multiple areas? And I could see, as Colonel Guyer mentioned earlier, even tying that into the maintenance. So if a principal calls in a maintenance issue, they input that into a technology system, and then that one input goes to operations. It goes to whomever that needs that as a data point, so that your people are not so tied up in what could be fairly time consuming events, particularly with the, I'm knocking on my wooden head here, particularly with the amount of projects that might be underway with the next referendum. Does that?
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead, Mr. Tryon.
I do agree with that sentiment. We definitely need to work closer together. And that's one thing I can say that's come from these 3.5 years plus our technology assessment is the recognition that there has to be a closer bond between the two departments, especially when closing out these projects. The sad part about it is usually after the closeout, it gets handed over to our school staff. Well, the worst mistake in technology you can make is to hand over a system that's not 100% to staff. Because if you do, the staff gets a bad taste in their mouth. Then all of a sudden you have problems on top of problems from that point forward throughout the lifespan of whatever system that is. And some of them could be real, but a lot of them may not be. And it's just bad practice. So that's one of the things we definitely are trying to alleviate to make sure we're handing over 100% systems to our school staff.
Okay, so I agree with that. One of the experiences I think I've seen is there's training of the staff, the school staff, repetitive training until they reach a level of proficiency with certificates that say they are capable of operating the system. And again, I'm looking at how to lighten the load on technology. Okay.
We appreciate
and so the other thing is to leverage on the executives at the various levels, utilization and activation rates. So if I'm a principal and my school is not utilizing technology or there are errors, that becomes a management metric that can be where they can be supported, more training and what have you, so that your people who are really the brain trust of how to leverage technology for efficiency and effectiveness can actually be looking forward at things that are step change improvements. So that's what I'm supporting and speaking to. And again, I'm just a user. I am not a technician or a technology person. So I come at it from how to free your people up so that they can really focus on the visionary and the strategic stuff of what's out there and how to track it. So.
And this brings me to a question, because I think this is really an interesting conversation, getting to some of the, staff training, I think is another thing, just technology wide is an issue that I've observed in the schools and is certainly an issue in every aspect of life. But so we have that facility dude in operations, which is now Brightly software. Do we have integration with that from whatever system, the technology and whatever system because we have CBRE system, and I don't know, Colonel Geyer, this is something for operations. I can't remember when they did our facilities assessment. CBRE has that. I don't know where that is, if that's in Facility Dude or if that's in a CBRE specific. And then technology, because Facility Dude has a ton of analytics and reports and cost estimates versus actual. And so however we can kind of centralize that data source, I think would be huge. And I think, Colonel Geyer, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I wrote down that a note to myself for the operations committee about, for example, a live work order database.
Mm-hmm.
We can do a relational database that can pull all this stuff together. And it's just a matter of having the users give the requirement to the technology folks to get the software needed and the programming needed to make multiple databases interact so that we can go live at any time to see data status on any work order and everything else. And but it's integrated. It's integrated with technology, it's integrated with HR, it's integrated with finance, it's integrated with everybody. To one stop, you can go and look at a current status of any job at any place with a simple couple keystrokes. And it's also easier to update because the user can update it live and it stays there. So I've got that as a task to look at it.
Yeah, you should look at Facility Dude now, brightly square, and look at their dashboard.
Yeah.
The capability is tremendous. I've never seen a report run out of Facility Dude. Okay, so that sort of ties off that one. So I've got 2 goals under that subcategory of looking at integration and staff training and how we're going to kind of assess those 2 things going forward. Because I think that those will really, whatever financing or staff support we need to get for that, I think that would be huge to talk about. The second piece of item F, to me, is also equally important is what is the role of technology in planning the next referendum? There are so many things that have come online. Virtual and augmented reality for virtual reality field trips, where you can take a group of kids who have never left Beaufort County to the Louvre, virtual classrooms and those sorts of settings, charging in, how we're going to integrate our devices, et cetera, the Wi-Fi, all that, because for some reason, and this is true everywhere, schools are the worst Wi-Fi ever. And I know that's largely cybersecurity, but it's becoming such an essential feature of education. And I think that's only going to increase going forward. So what I would like to hear is sort of how you guys are approaching that with this referendum and what the goal might be for the technology department.
Well, I can say one of the problems or reasons why school buildings have poor Wi-Fi is because we use poured concrete, poured block foundations and building walls. And unfortunately, those signals, especially since we're transitioning from the older 2.4 gigahertz frequencies to the newer 5, and then in the future Wi-Fi 6, the higher the frequency, the less penetration, which is good and bad. Because if you have over penetration inside of a building, those conical waves of signal starts getting disrupted at the edges, and you have people that they try to connect to this one, they try to connect to that one, and it causes heartaches for our end user. But we have recognized that all of our buildings are not 100% covered in Wi-Fi. A lot of our hallways, some of our outlying gymnasiums, that's one of our key things we've done with this referendum is really concentrate on our shared spaces, our PACs, our gymnasiums, our weight rooms, all the ancillary parts of our building that were previously not serviced with Wi-Fi. We do recognize that we do have problems with receiving cellular signals in our buildings. And once again, that goes back to our poured concrete walls. It disrupts the signal coming into our buildings. There is going to be in the future, I know that they're working on forcing facilities to make cellular available inside of them. It's similar to the project that operations is working on now by getting our radio frequencies for our first responders in our building. That's currently already passed and on the books, so we're catching up on that law. But the next law coming down the path is going to be for us to provide cellular in our building. And I know operations and technology have already been working on looking at some of the ways that we could introduce repeaters and different systems within our buildings to make that a reality. It's a double-edged sword because you're bringing in signals, you're bringing in the chance of foreign systems. So as long as we keep our cybersecurity strong, we segregate those individual systems so it's not a problem. It is on the radar, but it's not actively being implemented in our buildings with this current referendum.
So 2 things, and I'll let everyone else jump in, but 2 things I hear is A, I would like to see some discussions, even if they don't come to fruition, that are more proactive and future looking. Like, why can't Beaufort County, South Carolina as a whole is far behind other states in terms of technology, and it's something they're working very hard to change. Beaufort County, we have the corridor here and a lot of initiatives, and we're one of the wealthiest counties in Beaufort County. So we should have a leadership role in innovation in the school. And here we have this referendum. We're going to be asking the voters. I would love to, even if we decide not to do it, to have evidence that we're having some conversations along those lines. And to my second point is, I hate that, not I hate, I find it, to have to react to Columbia and lawmakers in terms of, we're going to do this because this law is coming down the pike. I would love to see like we're out ahead of the lawmakers in Columbia. And I think this department is well capable of having some interesting discussions. And like I said, I'm not asking for you guys to present, some sort of Gaudi-esque technology plan, but just like, what are some fascinating ideas that would generate public interest? So anyone else have a comment or question regarding this aspect? Mr. Guyer, Colonel Guyer.
Madam Chair, this topic was brought up just a couple hours ago at the Whale Branch Student Advisory Council meeting.
Yeah.
And they said, we can't get any cell phone service there. You guys must be blocking us. That's what the student said. He said, no, we're not blocking you. But even if you go outside the building, you're lucky to get 1 bar of cell service. And this is something that is frankly a community issue that will be brought up this evening at a north of the Broad, north of the Whale Branch community meeting tonight at 1800. They needed more cell towers.
Absolutely. And in 2015, we tried to work with Verizon, T-Mobile, and another provider, and was going to rent out a piece of land to place a tower on the property there at Whale Branch. But unfortunately, we couldn't get the powers to be on the cellular side to agree to putting up a new tower. They said there wasn't, at the time, there wasn't enough individuals to warrant it, but we know differently.
So yeah, and that's the kind of thing, I think that the school district can take, a lot of initiative with, in terms of improving, basically it sounds like to me, either we're going to do something different in terms of how we pour walls, which is probably not in the cards, or we're going to have to come up with a workaround. Because I don't think that over the next few years, the idea that we just have these walls and we're stuck with no Wi-Fi is going to work, because everything's going to Wi-Fi and cloud-based. So either, some, like I said, some solutions on that would be just interesting to talk about, and at least demonstrate to the public that we're aware of them and we're having those higher level conversations. Mr. Ney or Mr. Dallas, do you have any comments?
Yes, ma'am, Madam Chair. I'd like to applaud Mr. Chowan for back in 2015 trying to get a cell tower there. That's very forward thinking years ago. So kudos to you for that, sir. The community in which I live, we had reached out because we had cell coverage gaps in our community. And there are quite a few new entrants into the cell tower capital space. And they will actually construct a tower, and then they will lease or rent space to the big providers, which alleviates their need to invest more capital. So you were probably 7 years ahead of the rest of the community, Mr. Chowan, and it may be worthwhile to consider going to that and exploring it further now. And certainly happy to relay to you the names of the companies with which we dealt with here.
Absolutely. Any help would be most appreciated.
Will do, sir.
I don't have anything right now. I'm still kind of getting caught up on what the scope of this committee is. So I'm still kind of keeping my mouth shut and seeing what's going on.
All right. Whenever you feel like jump in, Mr. Ney. So what I think,
may I just have
Please.
another thought? And there's so many wonderful, we're blessed with a very strong technology group. Mr. Chowan, I saw and read through the report that you shared like 6 weeks ago when we first got sworn in, where you had a diagram, a graph that showed where we are, where we could go, what needed to be done, and you did it with dots and what have you. I thought that was a very effective visual, and it may be worthwhile, with the support of this committee and operations, under Colonel Geyer's leadership and others to sort of charter, you know, and liberate you to actually, or make a recommendation to the board to liberate you to actually think about what next things do we need. And
Yes,
Madam
sir.
Chair Boatwright has just spoke on that about, you said some kind of dude.
School dude.
School dude. What a name. But you know, there may be a lot of new developments that can help our kids because it would alleviate a tremendous amount of frustration on the part of teachers as well. So, you know, I think you're at the foot of the spear in terms of being able to help increase efficiency and effectiveness. And I definitely, as a single board member, not speaking for the whole board, would definitely support if that effort were to be put before us, okay?
Okay, so what I'm taking away from goals under this subsection is that we want to talk about how we can improve connectivity or at least solve some of the connectivity issues in schools, and how, you know, some creative or whatever kind of ideas we have that we can kind of at least discuss. Number two being, you know, some innovative ideas in terms of the referendum, to Mr. Dallas's point, what I would like to see, and I think a lot of parents would like to see, an understanding of how much things have shifted into the technology sphere. Like, just, I'm going to say as an aside, I would love to have virtual field trips. I mean, I think, you know, take kids from Beaufort County to these places. It's pretty impressive where they're going. That's the kind of thing I'm saying, like, if we're going to do that, is there infrastructure planning that we could put in place now with this referendum? And then I had another goal. Let's see. What else? There's something else popped into my head about which Mr. Dallas. It'll come back to me. What you're talking about. Oh, partnerships. You know, investigating some partnerships that I know we've done, but with technology, there's such an interest and some funding and some money rolling around that, you know, could we look at some partnerships? So that's kind of what I'm taking away from this discussion for the year. Does anyone else have anything to add to that?
Yes, on your questions about virtual field trips, I did want to let you know that we do have some small pilots going with virtual field trips with the goggles and a couple of different avenues. One has where you put a cell phone in the goggles and you basically look like you're in the Louvre or wherever you're at. So I would rather have Ms. Beckenvarsky talk about that because that's more on her side of the house. But there are some pockets that we're doing some trials with that right now. And we started that during the COVID endeavor because we couldn't do field trips with our kids. So we were looking for ways to give them a break from the classroom and give them that experience of going to other places, but unfortunately staying right here at home.
No, I think that's a technology that's going to have huge leaps in improvement over the near future. But that's exactly this. So over the course of this year, at some one of these technology committee meetings, we'll have an agenda to hear from Ms. Beckenvarsky about those sorts of things. So that's exactly what this is. This is sort of a planning meeting and to give structure for the rest of this year, because technology does not come by structure naturally in these systems. And I'm being kind of fast because we got a lot to kind of set up, and I know we have a hard stop at 4:30. So does anyone have anything else on agenda item F? Okay, so let's go ahead and look. And this was like the most vague of all, and I apologize. But I think one thing that I know I'm interested in, that we've had discussions in committee and come through in the technology assessment, is how we use data. And it goes right back to this facility due discussion. You know, what are we collecting? How are we analyzing it? What kind of reports are we running, and who are they going to? So I don't really know what the role of technology is in terms of, you know, running these kinds of reports.
Well, it's going to be a broader discussion, and we're going to have to include some of the other departments. We were briefly looking at this, and we were just trying to outline, like, say, for instance, HR. Their two key programs is Munis and Frontline. And then you look at finance. Their main programs are the Tyler Suite. You look at ISD, some of the main programs, Power School, Enrich, Destiny. But those are just, I would say, the main key pieces of software. There's hundreds of different educational softwares out there. There's a bunch of little programs that each department uses. So it would definitely have to be a bigger conversation and get the different departments involved to see what they may want to see out of this. They might not need all of this information, but they may want X. So I guess we would just have to do some deeper dives with the other departments to help kind of fish out what's needed.
Is that a fancy way of saying that the technology department doesn't really get involved in data collection, analysis, and distribution?
Yes, it is. Now, if they ask for help, we have a database person back there that can give them help. But since our team does not work daily in their systems, we're more of an avenue for support than day-to-day records.
Yeah, so it's interesting. In healthcare, most big organizations now have a chief technology officer, which would be you, Mr. Shohan, and a chief information officer, which I don't think we have that. But I would like to see some way that we kind of look at how we're pulling all this data together with all these disparate systems, because I feel like there's a lot of great reports that could be provided to the board that would paint a picture of what's going on in HR, what's going on in operations. And I see a lot of pivot tables and, graphs. So I just think that's an area. It may not be for Mr. Shohan, but I still think it could fall under the technology committee as like an information type. Mr. Nay, I see your hands up.
Kind of begs the question is, do any of the larger departments have data analysts?
Most do. They either have a data analyst or a data coordinator for a specific system, which they were trained and versed in, whatever it may be. That system, they have a backup for that system, and they pretty much do the day-to-day activities inside of it.
Well, then without recreating the wheel, how do we leverage our data analysts to get the information that we want instead of trying to get into the systems they're using? That's all.
Yeah, I think it's very decentralized right now, obviously.
It is. It is.
Okay. So basically, all I see, unless someone else has a comment, what I see kind of with this discussion, I think it's an important discussion, and I think technology is at the right place. I do think it's the right place for it. Mr. Shohan might, this might not be your thing for sure, because you're more of a CTO type, but I think it's important that we look at there's so much data. For example, we talk about parent engagement. There are ways to look at the systems we have and at least show some sort of data, as opposed to, I think the fallback is to let's do a survey. Well, it's hard. Then you get a lot of confounding variables in those surveys. Who's getting them? Who's filling them out? There's language barrier, et cetera. So I would like to maybe, as a goal going forward, I'm not sure, someone can maybe point me to the right staff person to reach out to. But one thing I'd like to know not right off the bat, but at some point is, how many systems do we have from which we collect data? And where do those systems, what department? I'd love to see some sort of a diagram of, okay, we've got frontline and that goes to HR, and frontline also works with, where they all go, so that we kind of understand I don't even know what we have available.
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
I think that's a great idea. I think what I'm sort of hearing as you speak, and you're very forward looking in this, is an inventory of existing systems, an inventory of reports that are produced by those systems by name, and then basically, where do those reports go? We led an effort like this many years ago, and we worked with what we at that time was management information systems, and we cataloged all the things we just named, and we found out that at least 50% of the reports had utilization less than 25%. And so that was a way to consolidate all these reports and again, go towards single entry. If it's finance and they enter the data, others look at it. And that led to a tremendous amount of freeing up human resources and placing those resources, same people, but in different roles to either grow revenues or cut costs or what have you. Because the system was now providing so much of the data that humans had to really sort of manipulate through Excel spreadsheets. And the final thing was those type of changes don't last unless the leadership throughout the hierarchy have accountability for utilization, activation, and using whatever's being produced, because otherwise it just resides in the technology or the CIO's office. And that sort of undermines the potential productivity that's available.
Yeah, I think those are excellent suggestions, Mr. Carlson. So yeah, that would be the goal. And, once we get some idea of what we have, we might have some other things that technology department can look at. But I think that would be it would really, I don't know. It was funny. I was in a meeting and we were talking about how many of our patients live off the island. And everyone was like, well, we could do a search, they had all these things. And I was sitting there and within 30 seconds, I pulled a report by zip code. I was like, do you want active? So all that data, I think data nowadays, people expect that if you're going to assess something or, whether it's the state report cards or HR reports, that you're going to come with some substantial data behind it. So I think that's an area that technology can help kind of shore up or build that muscle here in the school district. Okay, so if there's no other further comments on G, that's sort of my takeaway from G. Let's go to H. And this to me is, again, it may not be you, Mr. Shohan, this may be more Colleen Beckman-Barsky, but to me, I feel like, again, there's been such a shift in, especially with COVID and in the last 5 to 10 years in terms of what kind of jobs are out there. And so many jobs, you don't need a college degree, or, you don't need to leave Beaufort County. You don't have to move to New York. You can be a cybersecurity expert and stay local and have all that productivity. And I'm not sure that nationwide, the K through 12 education system is kept up with what skills employers are looking for. So it's, network architecture, cybersecurity, Python, Java, R. I don't think we're teaching R in statistics. So I was hoping to have some discussions throughout the year about what sort of conversations we're having with ISD and the technology department, and what sort of classes we'd like to offer, what sort of classes we're able to offer. So I don't know what's currently being done with that. And I know that's probably something Ms. Beckman-Barsky would have more to say about it, but can you give us an idea, Mr. Shohan?
Absolutely. Ms. Beckman-Barsky and I have had many discussions about it. And the ed tech team works directly with our CAPE department, Ms. Gilbert, the MSAP department, and our STEM department. And I think all three of those areas would be very insightful to the technology committee if we could get some reports from them. I know y'all probably seen some from like Mr. Flowers with his round, there's a name for it, it's not a Venn diagram. I'm sorry.
Pie chart? The
Yes.
pie chart?
Thank you, pie chart.
I think it's hilarious that you don't even remember, those are so old that you don't remember, no one uses pie chart. Okay, sorry, that's a side. Also, what is MSAT? You said Ed Tech, Kate, and MSAT?
MSAT, I'm sorry, I don't remember the name of the acronym, but it's our MedTech program.
Oh, the magnet school.
The
Okay.
visual body,
Magnet schools.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
But I would love for us to schedule some of these different departments that those individuals could definitely give you a better understanding of how they're reaching out into the community to help provide the right kids for the jobs locally.
Anyone else have a comment on that? Because we can start scheduling some conversations. One question I would have is, would it be good to do, Kate separate from Ed Tech, separate from MSAT, or to do them all at once, as a group?
It's up to y'all. We could do a whole meeting on it and have them come in back to back. I mean, I think that each one would probably have a 10-minute presentation, maybe 15 at max. So we could cover multiple in one meeting if needed.
Okay.
And since they kind of piggyback off each other, sometimes it's really good to have them in the room together and bounce some ideas off the group.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I'm sorry, Ms. Johan.
Please jump in.
Ms. Johan, I'm sorry, I may have cut you off, sir.
No, go ahead, please.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I like Mr. Shohan's second recommendation, which was to have them come in back to back. I think when multiple groups are weighing in with candid feedback, there's some hesitancy about whether or not our peers will perceive it as negatively and that negative, and that affects the openness. But if one group is coming in and they're candidly sharing, then we can amalgamate the information up and disperse it without, any hopefully identifying specifically which group said it. And I think we've seen more open feedback in that type of methodology.
So just to clarify, are you saying we'd have one meeting and have Kate come and then another meeting, or one meeting and separate back-to-back presentations?
No, one meeting with one group. And then once that group is completed, then bring in a second group and do the same type meeting over. And then at the conclusion of those groups, we could compare and contrast what we're hearing from different areas. And what that does is that allows you to not only see if there are similar issues, which means it's systemic, or are there peculiar issues relegated to one group? And it's more
Okay.
specific.
Sounds like a plan. Okay. And then I guess the other thing I would probably add to that list would be, the HR component. Like, is there a gap between what we like to teach and what we're able to teach? Because I'm pretty sure, at least with computers, it can be challenging to find enough staff. And so then if that's the case, do we have technology forward solutions for that? Because there's such a high interest in that. So, okay, that sounds good. I think that's enough of a goal to start with H. Mr. Ney or Colonel Geyer, did you want to add anything to H? Okay. And then the final thing for this meeting, I just thought I'd check in and see where we're at with the state technology plan, because I know that thing keeps getting pushed off. Did we ever get one finally submitted?
We were supposed to get feedback from the state at the end of this past year to build our plan. We have not seen that. They said it's delayed yet again. We have started building out our own plan that we will map back to the strategic plan of the district and the strategic plan for ISD. We've already begun outline and we've been examining other districts. Unfortunately, there's a lot of K-12 districts across the country that have outdated technology plans. I think COVID hit most of them pretty hard, and that's not been forefront, but we are making strides to at least get the base outline. So hopefully at maybe the next meeting, we can show you some progress into what we're working on in the background.
I love everything about that.
Okay, and I'd like to also update you on the disaster recovery plan that we've been working on with Mr. Lee Eisen. That was probably at about 95%. He's done his first completion. We've had our first review. We're hoping to bring it before senior staff mid to late March. And then hopefully can bring it to the technology committee at the latest in the April meeting. I'd like to see it in the March meeting, but I just can't guarantee that it's going to be 100% ready for you.
That sounds good. Okay, so any questions or comments on that? And to Mr. Ney and Mr. Dallas, we are required, is it every 3 years to do a state technology plan?
It was every 3 years, yes.
And those are all on file. And our last one was what, 2018?
18 or 19, yes.
Yeah. But COVID, they basically have changed how they want it done, and they've been very slow. So we've been kind of waiting on them. And it sounds like now we are innovating our own, we're going forward on our own. We're not waiting on them, which is,
yeah, we've spent a lot of time. And just so you're aware, Mr. Dallas, Mr. Ney, that in the past, the year of our technology plan being due, the state would give us an outline of how they wanted us to present the plan for the district. And that was in place until 19. And that's when the state was working on revamping a lot of the major technology for the state of South Carolina. So they told us to hold off, that they would come back with recommendations. Well, that pushed into COVID and it kept getting delayed. So I just didn't want you to think that We've just not done it since 2019. There is some reasons behind us not completing it.
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to be clear about that. This basically has been not forthcoming with some of that, but I think it's great to have even if the state comes back and says, well, we want to do something a little bit different, it's hard to keep operating without some sort of a plan. I mean, even if it's, so, okay. So let me go over what I've got written down here. So maybe in April, we'll have the finalized disaster recovery plan presented. And at some point, whether it's March, April, or May, you'll let us know. We'll kind of hear, at least get a rough draft, first reading, more or less. I don't want to say first reading, that's too formal, but some feedback on the state, what we're doing for in place of the state technology plan, or in coordination. We should schedule a meeting with the Ed Tech, the CATE, the MSAT, that group, to kind of hear about that. We're going to have a agenda item, which I think will be a pretty substantial agenda item, to look at the inventory of all of our existing systems and kind of what data we're pulling out of that and where that data goes and who's using it. One thing I think in this spring and summer, that I think it's important to stay on top of is the referendum planning. So to have another conversation about how we're integrating with operations. Maybe we can even plan, Colonel Guy, a joint operations tech committee meeting to talk about, how CB Heary and all these different groups, we're going to keep that together. And then staff training, I think, can probably wait a little bit on that. And then the other goal I have here is under, also under the referendum planning is, how we're going to look at connectivity, Wi-Fi, cell service, and what the solutions are for that. We'll have one in terms of hearing like a presentation on virtual reality, whatever sort of innovative things you guys have in your mind or are currently piloting that we might want to incorporate in the referendum, or at least discuss, to generate some enthusiasm for the referendum. And then possibly another agenda item. Again, this can be wait till later in the year on like maybe some partnerships that we've got to sort of with the referendum planning. So that's a nearly a year's worth of agenda items. And I'm sure they'll spawn their own. Does anyone else? Oh, and I think we should have at the March meeting, can we go ahead and get a presentation about the email policy or the, communication policy? Yeah, Mr. Champagne.
Are you referring to Mr. Cook's comments?
Yes.
Can I speak on that, or?
Yeah.
Well, since the inception of the one-to-one program at Beaufort County School District, the student email system is only between students and teachers. We do not allow students to email or receive email outside of our domain. So we only allow them to communicate with our teachers. The reason we do that is because of all the harmful spam, cyber threats that they would be receiving through email. So we've never allowed our parents to email directly to our students on the Beaufort County domain. Now, what we do offer, and I offer it to parents when they call me and ask me these questions, I let them know that they can either allow their student to have a cellular device, or that they can sign up for any third party, say get a Gmail email address. We don't block that. So as long as it's not within the school district's domain, if they have their own third party one, we're good with that. But that there's a level of responsibility that the district has when it comes to children and email. And that's why we're very careful with allowing that to come through to our students. So we've never allowed parents to email, and at this point, we would not allow parents on an internal system.
Well, and I can tell you, I went down the rabbit hole on domain cybersecurity and art poisoning and DKIM and all that. And the domain is where I would have the most concern with cybersecurity. So let's just have, I'll look, I don't know what the AR is. I'm assuming that there's some sort of policy where that's outlay, but let's just have a quick hit on the next month's agenda. As a parent, I would like clarification too, just because I want to make sure I understand if my kid has a Gmail account, can we download Gmail, or would it be a web-based?
Gmail is already on all of our devices. We are a Google shop. But when the kids log into Gmail to connect back with us, their
Yeah.
domain is BeaufortSchools.org, not Gmail. So it's a private domain that's internal to us. So, but if you go on to gmail.com and you set up a personal email, you can access it from our devices. But once again, that puts the onus on the parents to police that email account and be responsible for that email account. We do have virus protection and everything on our devices, but third-party email is just, it's scary. I mean, I think I spoke with y'all when y'all first came on the school board that in the average month, the district receives almost 3.5 million emails, and only about 500,000 to 600,000 of those actually make it to our employees. So that's, I mean, we're only talking about 20% good emails. So there's not a stellar track record. And since COVID hit, that number is just growing every year. Public institutions and K-12s and government facilities are one of the primary targets of these cyber criminals.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Madam Chair.
Go ahead, Mr. Dallas.
Yeah, I would sort of treat schools as a secure location and expect people with bad intentions to actually leverage that. It may be worthwhile to actually survey and see how other districts handle it. And I think caution would be the word I would focus on.
Yeah.
I think there also are methods where if a parent wants to contact their kid, they can. I'm sure if they call the principal's office and say, I need to speak to my kid or tell them I'll be late, I would presume there's some way of getting that message to them. Just having, I've just seen where the best intentions are fraught with real ill will. So just whatever that's worth.
And that's the biggest, that's the biggest problem is that since it's a closed system and it's only between our two domains, if we open it up for one parent, you just can't open it up for one parent. You open it up for all outside email.
So I think what we can do is, I don't want to get too much into this because it's not on the agenda or anything. I think that clarification, and I concur totally. I got very up to my eyeballs in domain security recently, and it's scary what they can do. So I appreciate the level of cybersecurity that you guys have for that. I think what we maybe could do is fold it in. At some point, we should probably, before the next school year, review the AUP, and we can kind of have that conversation then. But for right now, I think what you're saying makes total sense. So we can look at that at, some little part of a acceptable use policy. Okay. All right. So what I'll do is we have this list, and Mr. Shoham, maybe you and I can get together and strategize like what can go in March, what can go in April, what can go in May.
Okay.
And then are there any other topics that anyone wants to bring up at this point?
Are you going to be, I have a question. Are you going to be going through the OEs, any of those sections in the OEs per month, or is it all in one shot? Or
Yeah, we're going to do right now.
The monitoring, the interpretations and the monitoring. Those would come back so that you can start monitoring the OE.
Yeah, what I think that, as I understand it now, and as I made the point at the last meeting, I'm not sure we're doing it correctly, but I'm going to go with what we currently have on. I think what we can do is we'll do this at the all at one shot, OE 17. There's 5 subsections. Yeah. And what we'll do is we'll just be aware and tie these discussions as artifacts to support each one of these individually. And then at the end, we'll go through and make sure that we've satisfied, that everyone on the committee and the board feels like we've satisfied. Looking at this, at the topics we have right now, I think we'll cover most of it. There may be 1 or 2 things.
Okay, and I'll make sure that the OE is on the work plan, because the work plan tells you what month, when that OE is due. So then you will certify all of that then.
And I would recommend putting the OE in August, because I think having your technology stuff done prior to the next school year makes a lot of sense, as opposed to December. Colonel Gar, do you have a comment?
Nope.
No, you're good. Okay. I just know we have a lot. I know we have facilities, we have HR, we have all that stuff in like November, December. And then we kind of gives us an opportunity to talk about like refresh cycles and acceptable use and all those different things that might come up. All right.
Madam Chair, are we on item J now? I do have one.
Yes, we are on item J.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. I would like there to be some discussion on how does the school district communicate past the walls and the grounds of the Beaufort County school system. By that, we mean actually what techniques or equipment or methodologies are available to us from a technology point to actually communicate to residents and voters. Residents because they pay for us, and then voters because they elect the leadership of the school district. And I think as I've been circulating over almost the last 60 days, residents and voters, if they don't have kids in the school, they know so little about all the great things that are happening. And I think a routine campaign where there is a presentation, and I suggest that it be in person. Dr. Rodriguez does a superb job. I mean, as I'm circulating, I'm hearing Dr. Rodriguez speaking here, he's coming here. Then he's actually speaking to our Business Attract group of 550 people on the mailing list in May. So there are groups that are getting that out there. But I think a discussion about how do we leverage, are there ways to leverage technology to supplement that would be worthwhile.
Well, and I think that goes to Mr. Dallas. I love that because I find the same issue to have data, right? Like what data are we collecting to tell the story of what we're doing here in the district and how are we reaching people outside of the school district. So yeah, I think that definitely could fall within, and we could even have at some point a joint meeting with Candace, or bring Candace in and talk about. Does that sound like the track you were on, Mr. Dallas?
Yes, ma'am. And I actually think possibly starting that conversation with Dr. Rodriguez, because it may require a reallocation of workload for some of his direct reports. And if that occurs and he's a part of it, which he mentioned in the last board meeting that he was looking at some things. So it may already be underway, but that would help really move it forward. And use and inform and leverage a whole new group, broad group, so that some of those questions that people have can be answered. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, and I think that's very timely given the referendum, getting that story out. So, okay, that sounds good. Okay, so I've got that down as a future agenda topic as well. Colonel Guy or Mr. Ney, do you have anything you'd like to add? Well, feel free, because this can be done by email as well. So if other things come up, we'll bring those up. And like I said, I anticipate that these agenda items will spawn their own agenda children as well. So.
Well, Madam Chair, do we want to set a standard meeting time, or is this an as is needed time?
No. We had talked about setting a standard meeting time, I think the third Monday. But that just happened to fall this year on President's Day. So if that's good for everybody, the third Monday afternoons are good for me.
So the next one would be March 20th.
Okay.
That works for me.
And the time?
I'm on Monday. I like 3 or 4 o'clock.
So do I.
So I'll do that. So maybe 3 o'clock, because I know Mr. Shohan, that might make better use of his time.
I would suggest 3 o'clock because agenda setting is 5 o'clock, and a lot of times it would fall on that third Monday.
That puts pressure on us to get it done in a timely manner. I like it.
So.
Okay, so 3 o'clock. Does that work for you, Mr. Shohan?
Absolutely. The 20th is a wonderful day.
Woo, all right. So we'll just have it recurring 3 o'clock on the third Monday unless something changes, and then we'll send out a change of meeting notice.
Okay.
Okay. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Motion made to adjourn, Madam Chair.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Shohan.
Thank you, Mr. Shohan.
Thank you.
And Robin, thanks as always.